So there's load shedding here in South Africa, but I want to make a video about the BRICS Summit, and in particular with special reference to the American dollar, the use of the US dollar, seeing that in Zimbabwe we are now moving towards using the US dollar. I want to outline my thoughts on that and the options that Zimbabwe has as a country. Right now, I think for national interest for all of us, I don't care if Triple C has NPF, as long as we are Zimbabwean, I think of you as someone who is under the same umbrella. Here's the thing: BRICS Summit in South Africa tomorrow going forward. BRICS, China, South Africa, India, Brazil, and Russia. But largely, this is a Chinese led coalition, and they are thinking of coming up with a BRICS currency, which is going to offer a direct competition to the US dollar as a global reserve currency. Now, I know that a lot of people that listen to me are not really well researched in most of these economic concepts, so I'm going to try to be simple. Okay, I'm not going to be too technical, such that you won't even understand. When they say the US dollar is a global reserve currency, it means that most countries buy and sell and save in US dollars. So when want to keep money, they don't keep money in their own currency. They keep money, they keep savings in US dollars, because when they trade, when countries trade with each other, they don't trade using each other's currencies. On the contrary, they use the US dollar to trade. So you can, a Nigerian, when he's buying from a Cameroonian, they use US dollar. They don't use the Nigerian naira, or the Cameroonian, or the franc in Cameroon. No. So that use of the US dollar creates an excessive demand for the US dollar all over the world, not just in USA. So that is why United States is able to print more dollars and don't experience much inflation, because there's always a demand for US dollar. Perhaps they don't even print as much as the demand requires. So they are able to print and get away with it. Something which Zimbabwe cannot do. When in Zimbabwe, when we print, we can't get away with it. It leads to hyperinflation, because there is no country around the world that is demanding you Zimbabwean dollars. I mean, even in Zimbabwe, the Zimbabweans are dumping Zimbabwean dollars. So printing more Zimbabweans, creating excess liquidity or excess availability of Zimbabwean dollars chasing the US dollar, causes the price of the Zim dollar versus the US dollar to keep on going higher. Okay, the price of the US dollar in Zim dollar terms keeps on going high. That's what it means when we say the currency is falling. By the way, when we say currency is falling, what we're saying really, we're saying that in Zimbabwean dollar terms, the US dollar is getting more expensive. Okay, that's all that it is. It's 3 months ago in Zimbabwe, the US dollar was just 1,000 Zim dollars. Now it's 6,000 US dollars. I mean, it's 6,000 Zimbabwean dollars to buy a US dollar. So what is changing is the price of the US dollar when you are using your local currency. So when that price increases, it is called currency devaluation. And unfortunately, as that price increases of the US dollar, since we rely on the US dollar to buy foreign goods, so it means that everything else becomes expensive. That's why you've got hyperinflation in Zimbabwe, or high inflation in Zimbabwe, because everything, most of the things that we use in Zimbabwe, we buy from outside the country. Now, that's not what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is that China is there waging a war with the United States of America. Please listen carefully. It has got an important bearing to the Zimbabwean economy as well. The Chinese are, are, are the biggest producers in the world. They're actually the global manufacturing hub, China. Lately, in the past 10 years, there has been some diversification into Vietnam, Asian countries, and India is coming up as well. But traditionally, in the past 40 years, China has built this huge monster of being a global manufacturing hub. That is why China is buying from all these other countries. But all this time, China has been also been trading in US dollars, meaning that the demand of the US dollar is also felt in the China trade with all the other countries. Now, with the BRICS, China and the BRICS countries intending to have a BRICS currency, it really largely is a Chinese currency, by the way. It's just like SDR of the reserve of the World Bank are largely American. So China being the leader of this bloc, it really is an extension of the Chinese currency, this BRIC currency, because a lot of countries in Africa and in Asia are intending on joining the BRICS, the Middle East, also Saudi Arabia, and there was rumors that France wanted to join as well. Anyway, so in that scenario, when we have a lot of these BRIC countries and they use this one currency, the demand for the US dollar is a reserve currency flutters as these currencies keep on using their BRICS currency. And do you know why? Because in any case, they are trading, countries are trading with China a lot. Okay. Things are, they sell their basic resources to China. China produces products, and then they come back to those countries. So that whole trade, whether it's China buying from Zimbabwe or Zimbabwe buying from China, it will be used in that BRICS currency if what they are saying, if their plans go well. Now, it will indeed affect the US dollar. It will cause the US dollars used to drop. It might not take 1 year or 2 years. It might be a 10, 20, or 30-year uh, item, but eventually, if it succeeds, that's generally where it's going to. And that will lead to a massive inflation of the US dollar, because there will be an excessive amount of US dollars around the world and that are not needed. That probably will be sent back to the United States, and will be too much US dollars in USA chasing that the fewer goods. On top of that, the Americans have stopped producing anything. Most of the goods, you know, that is Americans consume are produced in China. So United States runs a trade deficit with China, because they stop producing their own stuff. They have got what they call the rust belt. Do you know why they call it the rust belt? Because it is rusted. They used to produce cars. They used to manufacture a lot of things. So, but then those manufacturing are closed. So they are rusty. That's why they call the rust belt. That manufacturing went to China. That's what they call globalization. When we Americans talk about globalization, actually it's not really globalization. It's manufacturing from America going to China. So the Americans are very sneaky. They discover this little trick. They discover that since everybody wants the US dollar, and Americans don't dig US dollar from the ground like Zimbabweans dig gold from the ground. No, they just print it. Okay, it's very simple. It's a declaration on the computer, importation on the computer. So they realize, why must we produce things? If we want things, we can just print US dollar, give people, they give us goods, and life goes on. It's been working. That trade has been working. American consumption in the past 30, 40 years, ever since Nixon's shock when he took the dollar out of the uh, gold standard in 1970, 1971. The Americans have been printing US dollars and receiving goods essentially for free. You could say that that privilege allows American economy to receive goods and services from around the world without actually working for them. All they do is just print dollars. That is why the Americans are not mining in Zimbabwe, in South Africa, in Africa. Do you know, they don't need to mine. If Americans want gold, use Zimbabweans makorokoza. You will korokoza the gold, give it to your gold buyers who will smuggle it to South Africa, and they're gonna smuggle it to Dubai, smuggle it to Switzerland. Then the Americans just print dollars and take the gold. They didn't even work. Just print dollars. Take the gold. What do they want? What else do we have in Zimbabwe? Do you have asbestos? Let's print print US dollars, they give to you US dollars, then they didn't work for, but you have to do the working. On the other hand, China does not have that privilege. So China has to come to Zimbabwe and mine. Russia also doesn't have that privilege. They have to come to Zimbabwe and mine. American doesn't have to come to Zimbabwe and mine. If Americans want Zimbabwean lithium, it's very simple. They don't need an American company mining lithium. Even Tagure's company, they can just take buy, give him US dollars, it gives them lithium. Will he not? Who doesn't want US dollars? So you see, this dependency on the US dollar really is not only Zimbabwe but all of countries around the world is what keeps the United States as a superpower. And Chinese has seen that. The Chinese now have got everything as a manufacturing and stuff and services, except that their currency is not a global is not used globally, even though they are the ones who have got a huge trade with countries around the world of real goods. Americans still have a lot of exports to other countries. Why? Because they are largely in services. They offer their financial services, just same thing as London. Their financial services are so huge that they charge a lot. They charge a lot for financial services, so that's why we pay them a lot. It looks as if they export a lot, but they don't really export goods much. They export much of services. Of course, there is goods, but most of it is services, highly priced services. Same thing with the UK. So they've got nothing to offer. So the problem, the other countries, the reason why they cannot offer financial services because they are corrupt. You see, simple as that. Matsotsi, what's the shame? Matsotsi akirani, something like that. Matsotsi, tiri matsotsi, cannot trust each other, steal from each other. That's what makes America great. That they're able to have a system of governance, checks and balances, so that nobody can steal from the other one. The Americans can steal from the rest of the world, but they will not steal from each other. Zimbabweans, they will steal from each other. South Africans, they will steal from each other. Africans steal from each other. That is why we're poor. We have not developed systems of good governance. We haven't, it doesn't come to our mind. What is the importance of good governance? Who does it benefit? Good governance doesn't benefit foreigners, it benefits you as a country. So, as the Zimbabwean military, it is to be a prerogative of yours to ensure that there's good governance. There is security in the banking industry. The security, political stability, and security is to the beneficial of these officials of the military themselves. Okay, don't be lied to by ZANU PF. This is, ZANU PF is a cancer in Zimbabwe. The people in ZANU PF think that the revolution means that ZANU PF must be in power. So the other people that are not ZANU PF, so you say that they're not Zimbabweans, they must know their ideas don't matter. The revolution was for ZANU PF only. So you see, if the military accepts that and agrees with it, then they get lost and lose the war, because the military is supposed to ensure that the best ideas in the country come forward. Can you imagine military commander? Let me talk to Valerio Suband. I respect the man. We mustn't. I do not like the idea of. We don't want to delay the military or to be too much touch on the military unless it is necessary. Okay, so let me talk to Valerio Suband because it is necessary. Imagine the army commander in Zimbabwe, training soldiers. There is a training soldiers. You recruit soldiers. And I'm sure there's a thing that you must do. Run 10 kilometers. Imagine these fat kids, these kids from Borodale whose father is a rich billionaire. They want to be military men. They can't even run. Okay. They call an Uber. After running 1 kilometer, they call an Uber, takes them to 9.5 kilometer peak. Then they stroll 500 meters and they say we're finished. Then they check out the ZANU PF card. They say, Tirizano must join the military. And then you allow them because they will ZANU. But those ones who know what they're doing, you say you don't want them because they're not ZANU. And then the war comes. Do you think that Zimbabwe will survive that war? With soldiers who cannot fight the war. They were put in there because they are connected. And those soldiers that are strong, that have been training, who can shoot well, who are strong, they've been chased away because Mandevere. or mazezuru, or makaranga, or mandau, or machi, whatever it is that you do not like. And then the war, the real war comes. How do you think they're going to feel? Obviously, they will lose. It's the same thing. It is the role of the military to ensure that the best is in power. The best is in the right places. If we've got the best in the right places, nobody will destroy the country. The military is still in control. I do not know how Robert Mugabe lied to the military guy that if he is out of power, the military is out of power. No, it's not. The institution remains always. Doesn't matter who is the president, who's not. To understand the contestations for presidency of political powers should should uh, should occupy a certain space that is well defined, boundaries that are well defined, such that those that are within that boundaries can compete for that political power. Doesn't matter who is in power. So we mustn't have be worried who's gonna win the elections. You know, the US military, I always use them because they're the best in the world. The US military is not concerned whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans who are going to win the elections. It doesn't matter. Okay. At the end of the day, the US military is still running the United States hegemony, including the US dollar itself. Is stuff that they talk about in the US military. In the Zimbabwean military, is there a division that speaks about the Zimbabwean dollar, that speaks about supporting the Zimbabwean dollar, that speaks about the research? Do we have economists in the Zimbabwean military that specifically on the Zimbabwean dollar? Do we have a department in the Zimbabwean military that looks at the environment of Zimbabwe? And all other issues? Do we have military people in situations that do that? Then they really are actively going forward to do that. Do we have parts, departments in the military that are dedicated to ensuring political stability in the country? Do we have that? Tell you what, in the United States they have them. That is why they're the superpower in the world, and nobody can mess with them. Everybody can mess with us because we are disunited, disorganized, do not know what is forward and what is backward, and that needs to change. My name is Ngubani Zonde, and I'm coming to Harare, and we're going to have a very serious discussion about taking the country forward to a place of glory, not to a place of disglory. So, going back to the Chinese and the use of the US dollar, is that the Americans are so clever when it comes to Zimbabwe. We give them everything, and then they just give us paper. So we need to change that. We need to bring confidence to the Zimbabwean dollar, to that paper that we print in Zimbabwe. There's various ways of doing it. Many of them I'm not going to discuss on this video for obvious reasons, because currency management is something that the one who's managing the currency must have some secrets and not tell the broader public and not tell the market, otherwise they will ruin you. I will win any currency war at any given time with any given country that wages this war against the Zimbabwean dollar. If I am at the helm, if I can help it, if I can help change it, you know, we need to maintain a stable Zim dollar, and I know how to do it. As I said, I'm not going to tell you how, because that's not what currency managers do. We can maintain a stable dollar for economic stability. And one thing I will do if I had influence in Zimbabwean leadership and politics is this thing, that when we mine our gold, okay, we must not export it. Rather, the central bank that buys the gold must buy it at a premium to the current international price, but by giving them Zimbabwean dollars. So you create Zimbabwean dollars by having gold miners coming to the reserve bank. They give you money. Let's just say, for example, the gold price is around $2,000 an ounce right now. You give the miners $2,000 plus 5% premium, meaning you can give them 2,100 US dollars. You will buy in the international market is 2,000. You as the Zimbabwe Reserve Bank, you buy it for 2,100 US dollars. But you don't give them US dollars, you give them an equivalent of Zimbabwean dollars that you have printed. So meaning that all those Zimbabwean dollars that are taking out, they are backed by the gold that is coming from the miners. So that is one way of of of, of having the currency in the country. It still doesn't lose value because it is backed by something. There's more to the idea, but I'm not going to say it here for obvious reasons. I'm just saying for the sake of opening our minds to understand that there is a war that we need to fight. There's a currency war that we need to fight, and it will lead us to succeed. I see a path on how Zimbabwe can be a superpower in the region. This South Africa that is deindustrializing, this one that is failing to manage ESCOM and industries that are falling apart, I know what we can do in order for us to be an industrial hub that can service the whole region. Have a great evening.